Hey there, and welcome to The Deep Dive. We've got a truly fascinating journey ahead of us today, drawn directly from a stack of source material shared by one of our listeners, specifically excerpts from Edward Snowden's memoir, Permanent Record.
That's right. Our mission for this deep dive is really to move past the headlines and dig into the personal account laid out in these pages. We want to uncover the path, the influences, and the specific experiences that shaped his perspective and ultimately led to some of the most significant revelations about government surveillance in modern history.
Yeah, we have sources here packed with personal stories, glimpses into technical systems, and some pretty deep reflections on privacy and state power. Think of this as your shortcut to understanding not just what happened, but importantly, who this person was and why they felt compelled to take the actions they did.
Exactly.
So let's open up these sources and unpack what stands out to you. So where does the story really begin according to these sources? It paints a picture of a life surprisingly rooted in a deep sense of American history and family service.
Absolutely. The sources highlight a family history stretching back centuries, mentions of forebears like Amaziah Jocelyn, involved in the revolution,
Right.
and descendants serving in pretty much every conflict since, even Civil War relatives on opposing sides. The memoir presents it as a family that felt, a strong pull to answer the call of duty.
And you see that sense of service clearly influencing his immediate family environment. His father was a chief petty officer in the Coast Guard, working as an electronics instructor and curriculum designer.
And that technical background is woven throughout the early anecdotes. You see his mother instilling responsibility with chores and literacy by labeling drawers, socks, underwear.
Yeah, I remember that detail.
And those early trips to the library where the large humming machines captivated him.
He called them big machines. That detail really stuck with me. And helping his dad fix things, learn about voltage and current, power and resistance, it feels like such foundational, hands-on learning.
It truly was. His father is described as a household mad scientist who wasn't afraid to take things apart and try to fix them. Sometimes it worked.
Right.
Sometimes the broken gadget ended up in the things that can't be unbroken box.
Yeah.
But the memoir notes he was always impressed that his father dared to hazard an attempt. That willingness to experiment, to understand by taking apart, even risking failure, seems like a crucial early lesson.
Which leads to a particularly pivotal childhood moment, the broken Nintendo Entertainment System,
Yeah,
an NES.
right. The power light was dead. His father couldn't fix it at home and took him to his lab at the Coast Guard base where they had specialized test equipment. And that's where he first encountered computers.
Thinking they were just TVs. Why does this place have so many TVs? Why are they all tuned to the same channel? Just mesmerized by that pulsating glow of electric green screens.
It was a new universe.
Yeah.
And while traditional school didn't always connect with him, the NES, ironically, became his real education. Lessons learned from games like Zelda and Mega Man. Although he humorously notes, Duck Hunt didn't prepare him for people laughing at his failures.
Good point. But that idea of Super Mario Bros. 1.0 only moving to the right, it's such a simple game mechanic, but he frames it as a metaphor. And online learning, he felt, was better and even more practical than school. The internet wasn't just a tool, it was this limitless space that ignited an insatiable desire to understand, this need to know everything.
Yeah.
He even describes sneaking online after his parents were asleep, using pillows to muffle the modem noise.
That takes me back. The sources capture the spirit of early Web 1.0, beautifully fostering experimentation and originality of expression, emphasizing the creative primacy of the individual.
Yeah, that really comes through.
Yes, it was often chaotic, with flashing backgrounds and dancing hamster gifs. But the key insight is that it felt like the guiding intelligence behind the site was human and unique.
It was definitely a different online ecosystem. Even gaming had real-world consequences, like massive phone bills from online games, leading to his sister's classic sibling revenge.
Oh, yeah.
Picking up the phone to break the connection.
A rite of passage for anyone with dial-up internet, definitely. And interestingly, he frames hacking not just as juvenile mischief, but as a response to systems he saw as illegitimate, like the school not recognizing dissent. He viewed it as the sanest, healthiest, and most educational way to assert autonomy and address adults on equal terms. That's a really strong statement about early digital activism,
It suggests an early inclination towards finding alternative avenues when traditional systems felt unresponsive or unfair. The move to Maryland also grounds him in that family history, the prevalence of the Snowden name linked to historical Quaker roots and service in the area.
And it's worth noting that running through this whole early section is his stated discomfort with autobiography. He contrasts it sharply with the intelligence community's training in baseline anonymity, creating a blank page personality for secrecy and imposture. Sharing these personal details goes against, well, decades of ingrained professional habit.
So how does this individual, the computer guy, who initially felt he should never have even been let into the building, navigate the complex world of the intelligence community?
Well, his entry was anything but traditional. He was hired by the NSA at just 22 with a top-secret clearance, then moved to the CIA less than a year later.
Wow.
All without a bachelor's or even an associate's degree. The sources explicitly state the agencies were breaking all of their own rules in the desperate search for technical talent in the post-9/11 world.
That post-9/11 context is absolutely crucial. The sources describe it as a period marked by a litany of American destruction by way of American self-destruction, characterized by secret policies, secret laws, secret courts, and secret wars. The government frequently classified, denied, or distorted the impact of these actions, and he acknowledges how often the agencies get things wrong.
And a major element of this landscape was the massive reliance on private contractors. This is described as strange and vaguely sinister, citing companies like Blackwater, later known as Evil Services and Academia and CIA.
This whole contracting culture is framed as a legal and convenient method of transferring public money to the private purse.
Yeah.
There's even this wry observation that the green badge worn by contractors symbolize money.
Exactly. The government bears the significant burden and cost of performing background checks and sponsoring these individuals through entry-level jobs to get them cleared.
Right, the initial investment.
But once they have that top-secret clearance, they often bolt for the door, swapping their government blue badge for a higher-paying green badge contractor job. The government invests heavily, but reaps few long-term benefits from retaining that talent. It's a strange dynamic.
His first government job sponsoring his clearance was at the University of Maryland, working for the Center for Advanced Study of Language, CASL.
On the surface, focused on language learning, but the hidden corollary for the NSA, as outlined in the sources, was improving computers' ability to understand foreign languages.
Oh, okay.
Because they struggled to find enough human translators who could pass security clearances.
Got it. The sources point out that after his revelations, the government attempted to undermine him by calling him only a contractor or a former Dell employee, accusing him of job hopping or being disgruntled.
But his memoir directly refutes this, calling them lies of convenience. He argues that changing jobs frequently was simply the established, profitable career track within the very contractor system the agencies created and relied upon. It wasn't unusual at all.
Shifting to his experience inside the CIA, he details the challenging commute up to an hour and a half each way in Beltway traffic, just to get from his home near Lindsay in Maryland to the facility in Virginia. He used the cover name Commissar when discussing the job with her.
Right. He paints a vivid picture of the contrast between the imposing public-facing headquarters building and the actual workspace, a grimy, cinder block-walled room underground.
Not exactly glamorous.
No. And the people there, not a sinister cabal, but mostly computer dudes, many also contractor badges, navigating business casual for the first time. Some still showing signs of removed piercings or dyed hair. Not what you might imagine.
And this is where the difference in access becomes symbolic. His team had access to nearly all systems, while the help desk, staffed by older govies with limited technical skills, handled basic issues and had to escalate foreign field problems.
Walking past that help desk into a secured vault they couldn't access became this potent symbol for him. It represented a fundamental generational and cultural change.
Oh, so?
What young technologists, essentially hackers from his generation, were being given complete access to and wield complete power over unparalleled technological systems of state control. It was a huge shift.
That access leads to a profound realization he describes. The computer guy knows everything, or rather can know everything. Higher privileges meant access to virtually every byte of his employer's digital existence.
And for someone whose fundamental curiosity since childhood was driven by a need to understand how everything works, This access allowed him to finally satisfy that.
Right.
He even used it to verify things he'd wondered about, confirming, yes, man really did land on the moon. Climate change is real. Chemtrails are not a thing. A fascinating little detail in the memoir.
Indeed. He also mentions training on concepts that felt almost like magic, like Van Eck freaking the ability to reproduce screen displays from the electromagnetic emissions of a monitor.
It felt like voodoo, he says, something he didn't fully grasp conceptually at the time. But the instructor's explanation that the threat was real because the CIA was doing it to others instilled the seriousness of it.
It highlights the abstract, almost theoretical nature of some of the threats they were trained on. And then there's a significant conversation with the head of the school where he brought up problems he saw.
Only for the head to admit they couldn't be solved and advise him to suck it up and focus on his performance review.
Which he clearly perceived as a veiled threat or maybe a bribe to stay quiet. This interaction, according to the sources, deeply bothered him and solidified his feeling that the fun was over and it was justice I was after.
This interaction seems to crystallize the internal moral conflict he was already grappling with. He loved his country, believed in public service rooted in his family tradition, and swore an oath of service not to an agency nor even a government, but to the public, in support and defense of the Constitution.
Yet he felt increasingly party to the violation of those very civil liberties he'd sworn to protect. He struggled intensely with balancing his contract of secrecy with the demands of that oath.
And he knew the consequences.
Oh, yeah. He knew the severe consequences for even hinting at the truth, potentially a lifetime sentence. It was a huge weight. Okay, let's connect that internal struggle with the reality of the surveillance state as he came to understand it through his work. He felt the internet he grew up loving was disappearing.
Right. Replaced by one where simply going online became a fraught ordeal. The era of free-form experimentation was gone. Now, self-expression required strong self-protection. He witnessed the government's increasing encroachment, seeking access to the networks of major private companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon.
And not always through the front door, right?
No, this wasn't always through overt legal means, but via direct orders that were kept secret and clandestine subversion efforts.
It felt like user data, which generated huge profits for these companies, was simultaneously being pilfered for free by the government. There was this sense of helplessness regarding individual privacy in this new landscape.
And a significant part of this dynamic, the sources emphasize, is the legal disconnect. Law, inevitably lagging behind technology,
Always playing catch.
offers substantially more protections to a communications content than to its metadata.
And yet, metadata is often where the real power lies for intelligence agencies.
Precisely. Metadata, though seemingly innocuous, allows for both big-picture analysis of populations and the little-picture ability to map an individual's life with astonishing detail. It creates perfect maps, chronologies, and associative synopses, from which algorithms can extrapolate behavior predictions.
Wow.
As the sources put it, metadata tells them virtually everything they'd ever want or need to know about you, except what's actually going on inside your head.
This is where he encounters a key document, the unclassified report on the president's surveillance program from 2009.
This report was compiled by 5 agency inspectors general and was presented, according to the sources, as a substitute for a full congressional investigation into the Bush-era NSA overreach.
So not a real investigation.
To him, it signaled that the Obama administration was not pursuing a proper reckoning with the past.
That suspicion led him to look for the classified version of the report, but he couldn't find it initially.
No, it appeared later, hidden away, filed in an exceptionally controlled information, or ECI, compartment.
ECI.
Yeah, that's a classification level so high it's designed to hide information even from most people with a standard top secret clearance. The dense classification markings on it, top secret obiciscamente coniform, suggested that pretty much only a few dozen people in the world are allowed to read this. Extremely restricted.
And this classified version detailed the NSA's secret and, as it turned out, unconstitutional interpretation of Section 215 of the Patriot Act.
Yes. The FISA court order, based on Section 215, compelled companies like Verizon and AT&T to turn over any tangible thing. But the NSA secretly interpreted this phrase as permission to collect all U.S. telecom metadata on an ongoing daily basis, something later ruled unconstitutional.
The sources use the term lexical sophistry to describe this, playing with words.
It's a way of manipulating definitions.
Yeah.
Redefining when data is acquired or obtained, not when it enters the database in bulk, but only at a future point when an analyst queries it.
So they could keep it forever.
Essentially, the goal was perpetuity. creating the technical capacity to be an eternal law enforcement agency.
An agency that could dig through anyone's past communications at any time to find evidence of a crime, allowing a future administration to instantly track everybody. That's chilling.
And this potential for automated total enforcement is starkly illustrated by that almost darkly humorous smart fridge anecdote from the sources.
The refrigerator that monitors your habits, like drinking directly from the milk carton or not washing your hands, to calculate your felony probability.
Right. It takes the idea to an extreme, but the insight is chilling. Automating the enforcement of all laws, even obscure ones, like the Maryland adultery law with its $10 fine or the NC bingo game limit.
Things nobody even thinks about.
Exactly. The sources argue that this kind of extreme justice, applied consistently and thoroughly, can easily become extreme injustice.
This ties into a concept that I see as itself aware of the Frankenstein effect, or blowback,
where technological innovation or operational decisions outpace ethical and legal restraints, creating an uncontrollable monster.
like unforeseen consequences.
Exactly. The sources connect this to the post-9/11 mandate of never again, a mission they argue couldn't be accomplished, and how the political class's evocation of terror became a cynical attempt to turn terror into a permanent danger that required permanent vigilance enforced by unquestionable authority.
So, armed with these insights and wrestling with that immense moral weight, what was the specific path he took towards disclosure? It started with taking a job in Hawaii.
Yes, a position as a SharePoint systems administrator at the Office of Information Sharing. He describes it as a significant step down the career ladder with duties he could perform in my sleep. This predictability allowed him to automate tasks and, crucially, free up time.
Time he used to build an automated read board platform he called Epic Shelter.
Right. This platform was designed to scan documents across multiple intelligence networks, NSA, CIA, FBI, JWICS, aggregating them into personalized read boards based on clearance and interests.
Okay.
It ran from a server he managed and, importantly for his purpose, stored local copies for deep interagency searches.
And this platform became central to his decision. He used it to bring the documents he needed closer, comparing it explicitly to turning bulk collection against the IC itself.
Kind of ironic.
Essentially Frankensteining the system he was part of. He notes the platform's legitimate use provided the perfect cover for his activity.
The physical process of collecting the documents involved moving files from the Heartbeat server onto forgotten legacy Dell PCs, old desktops not connected to the cloud, sitting in a disused corner of the office.
Wow.
He describes it as an agonizingly slow, boring, but also cripplingly scary process. I can only imagine.
And for storage, he turned to SD cards, mini and micro SD, preferring them over bulkier thumb drives. He deliberately withholds the exact copying and encryption methods, stating, so that the NSA will still be standing tomorrow, which gives you a sense of the technical cat-and-mouse game.
This whole process highlights the unique, almost accidental power wielded by technologists in these systems. They have access, often disproportionate to their formal authority.
Yeah, that imbalance.
There's this fundamental imbalance between what they are intended to know and what we are able to know.
And the sources argue this gives technologists a vast power to address concerns to the culture at large, creating a special responsibility to contextualize and explain to demystify these complex systems for the public.
Right. He expresses real sorrow for fellow technologists who were incurious about the potential for abuse and became, in his view, machines, just doing the job without thinking.
Before taking the final step, he wrestled with immense internal conflict. The memoir captures this. Who was he to disclose? Who elected him president of secrets?
Big questions.
He describes being scared of being doubted as much as I was of being misunderstood.
That fear of being doubted is explicitly stated as the reason he chose to disclose with documentation. To reveal programmatic secrecy, he needed to describe its workings, not just through anecdote, but with the agency's actual files. Exactly. He knew disclosing even one PDF meant facing prison.
He also had deep reservations about traditional media outlets. He specifically mentions the New York Times and its past handling of the warrantless wiretapping story, which was delayed or suppressed initially.
Right. He feared a similar outcome, which he felt would be tantamount to turning me in.
Yeah.
It led him to question if he could trust any institution. Yeah. Pretty profound crisis of faith there.
So he sought out specific journalists. Glenn Greenwald, described as a skeptical, argumentative civil liberties lawyer turned columnist. Laura Poitras, who was ready to fly to meet him, and Ewan McCaskill and Bart Gellman, who became stalwart partners. He felt a particular affinity with Laura and Glenn due to their personal stakes in these issues.
There were initial delays in getting the journalist to meet him, and he describes feeling an intense urgency in Hong Kong, begging, "Please come before the NSA realizes I've been gone from work too long." The clock was ticking.
The departure from Hawaii, as recounted in the sources, sounds incredibly difficult on a personal level. Those last moments with Lindsay encouraging her camping trip, holding her tightly, crying after she left.
Yeah.
Feeling immense guilt about the pain he knew he would cause.
And his mother visiting, which was uncharacteristic, perhaps expecting an engagement announcement. He describes rationalizing his actions by holding on to the belief that Lindsay and his mother would support each other through the fallout. It's heavy stuff.
There was an initial feeling of relief upon leaving the country, feeling like he'd beat the game.
A fleeting moment.
But that was quickly replaced by anxiety as the journalist's delays mounted.
The first stories landed quickly once they met. June 5th, 2013, the FISA court order compelling Verizon metadata. June 6th, the PRISM story in both The Guardian and Washington Post.
Things move fast then.
Yeah. He knew identification was increasingly likely, especially as office emails asking for status updates started hitting his inbox, which he wasn't answering.
Immediately after the disclosures, he describes feeling marked, anticipating harassment and disparagement, not just of himself, but of his character and loved ones.
Standard playbook, unfortunately.
He places himself in a lineage of previous whistleblowers and leakers, like Daniel Ellsberg, Thomas Tam, and others who revealed government secrets.
Seeking asylum proved to be an enormous challenge. His team reached out to numerous countries, but even advanced democracies were wary of incurring the U.S. government's wrath.
Understandable, but difficult for him.
They offered sympathy but no guarantees, advising him to avoid countries with extradition treaties or cooperative intelligence relationships. The idea of a UN laissez-passer came up, but was incredibly difficult to obtain. Basically, options were limited.
And then the dramatic events at the Moscow airport. Attempting to fly to Ecuador via Havana on an Aeroflot flight, a Russian official informed him his passport was invalid.
Right, the U.S. government had canceled it mid-flight, stranded him.
Wow.
He refused Russian offers of direct assistance, and the airport administration ignored him and the Ecuadorian safe conduct pass he presented. His presence became this unexpected global spectacle playing out in the transit zone.
And the incident involving Bolivian President Evo Morales' plane truly underscored the lengths the U.S. was willing to go to.
Oh, yeah. Suspecting Snowden was aboard, the U.S. pressured European countries to deny the plane airspace, forcing it to divert to Vienna for a search, a clear violation of sovereignty that resulted in UN censure.
That's incredible.
It confirmed the very real risk to any flight he might be suspected of being on. Despite these personal and international challenges, the sources also detailed the tangible impact of the revelations.
For example, the FISA court ruling in 2015 found the bulk collection of phone records illegal, calling it unprecedented and unwarranted.
A major finding. And Congress responded by passing the USA Freedom Act, which specifically amended Section 215 to prohibit bulk collection of Americans' phone records and require a warrant for specific records.
So real change happened.
It shows that public revelation, sparked by documentation, can indeed lead to legislative and legal changes.
Yet, the sources also detail the significant legal challenges he would face if he returned to the U.S. He's charged under the Espionage Act,
Which is a very old, blunt instrument.
And crucially, he notes he wouldn't be allowed to argue in court that his disclosures were for the public good or civically beneficial. Key facts about the programs themselves would be forbidden.
He argues that he would face a show trial where the only relevant fact the government would allow is that he disclosed classified information, which isn't disputed.
So guilt is predetermined.
Therefore, returning for trial is effectively returning for sentencing, and likely a cruel one, potentially up to 10 years per document.
Wow, that really was quite the journey, wasn't it? From that kid fascinated by big machines and fixing NES consoles to a systems administrator grappling with systems of mass surveillance. It really reveals so much.
Yeah, about the intersection of technology, government power, and personal responsibility.
It absolutely does. It powerfully illustrates how an individual's unique background, technical skills, and moral framework can collide with massive institutional shifts, like the post-9/11 expansion of the intelligence apparatus.
The tension between that core human curiosity to understand how things work and the institutional demands of secrecy is palpable throughout the sources.
And that idea of perpetual data retention, aiming for the capacity of an eternal law enforcement agency, it truly brings the stakes of metadata collection into sharp, almost uncomfortable focus.
It really does.
It's not just abstract bytes, it's the potential to meticulously map, predict, and potentially even enforce rules we didn't know existed, echoing those bizarre examples like the Maryland adultery law or the NC bingo limit from the sources.
Precisely. The sources powerfully argue that while laws often lag behind the rapid pace of technological development, the fundamental human desire for privacy is universal.
Right.
And critically, it's a right that doesn't require justification from the individual. Rather, it's the state that must justify any violation of it.
That's a key point.
And the impact of these revelations, that the FISA court ruling, the USA Freedom Act changes, demonstrates that bringing these secrets to public light through documented disclosure can initiate crucial public debate and lead to real legal and policy shifts. It can make a difference.
Absolutely. It ultimately leaves you considering, what does all of this mean for you, the listener, as you navigate your own digital life every single day?
Indeed. It raises an important question for all of us. In an age where so much of our existence is recorded as digital data, and where technology offers governments and corporations unprecedented capabilities for surveillance, what is the true nature of privacy in the 21st century, and what, if any, is our individual responsibility in safeguarding it?
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into permanent record. We hope it gave you plenty to think about.